Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Josh Berkman to defeat Dustin Hazelett. Don't you forget it. And I'm here to talk about Jean Matsumoto versus Dan Argueta. Jean Matsumoto is making his UFC debut. This guy's got a very pretty record, 14-0. He won on the Contender Series last year. That's what got him into the UFC. And that was a hard-fought fight, a decision where he was tested and taken down and all the rest of it, but he still clearly got the better of the guy. I forgot his name, Kelsey or something, but Casey. But I've seen this guy Jean tested in many other ways in those other fights. I've seen him rocked, knocked down in multiple fights, taken down in multiple fights, and he's passed every test. This guy's a really comfortable striker, and his submissions have been there for him on multiple occasions throughout his pro career. Guillotines and front chokes, anacondas and darces mainly. But those are some effective tools for defending against wrestlers like Dan Argueta, I suppose. And he's got good cardio too, as well. Jean Matsumoto. I've seen him fight multiple 5-round fights. Some he was, at least one of them he was in cruise control, dominating the fight. But I've seen him in a very competitive 5-round fight. This guy Vanderlei Mexicano or whatever. That's the guy that hurt him and ripped him to the mat, took his back. He definitely had a lot of moments in that fight and throughout that fight. But Jean Matsumoto was the better man, and he was able to take it. And as is the case in most of his fights, he was the last man standing. Although that Contender Series fight, round 3, was pretty close. But still, I scored it for him. But the guy's got a very great record. He's passed every test that's been put in front of him. This guy Perpetua, he dropped John Matsumoto in round 2 with aggression, but definitely hurt him. And John Matsumoto took over that fight even after getting taken down. He ripped Fabio to the mat and took him down in all 3 rounds and largely dominated him and got him out of there in round 3 from the full mount. But this is a different type of fighter in Dan Argueta. Dan Argueta is durable as all fuck. I say that based on seeing him lose to especially Damon Jackson, which I know that Damon Jackson's not the biggest concussive puncher, but if he's on your back, if he's on top of you, you're in a world of trouble, especially if you're a weight class below him and taking the fight on short notice like Dan Argueta did. And Dan took all that and survived. He didn't really make much of a fight out of it, but still, he impressed me nonetheless. And his other losses to Ricky Tercios on The Ultimate Fighter and Miles Johns last year, or earlier this year, whatever the fuck, those were both close fights, and, his pressure was there for him, if nothing else, but he definitely ran into some trouble with Miles Johns, who was a very difficult stylistic matchup, I believe. And against Ricky Tercios, in the end, he was out-hustled and lost a tight decision there. But despite losing to these guys, he's still, that's only given me more faith in his durability, which I would think takes away the danger of Jean Matsumoto, as well as it makes it easier to bet on his decision line, because I think that's his primary path to victory. But the pick and the bet is Dan Argueta. I think he's got the wrestling where once he is in Jean's face, he will be able to rip him down a few times throughout this fight. And I also think, in general, even though he's the worst striker and this guy Jean is serious, Dan's not bad. And again, he brings the pressure. And in any sort of a close fight, the guy leading the dance is going to get that extra nod, the half a point on the judge's scorecard. So I'm picking Dan to win this fight. Dan, he's a guy that's gone the distance a few times lately. He's gotten a lot of finishes earlier in his career, but here in the UFC, I think we'll see more decisions from him in his victories. That's the way it usually goes with a lot of fighters. And I think Dan is up for the challenge. He's got excellent cardio as well. He's been 5 rounds as well against a guy, Diego Silva, I think. But that was a hard-fought 5-round fight where he was a little behind early, but then took over. It was a split decision, but it shouldn't have been. But I think Dan's got a lot to trust as well. His record may not be as pretty, but his resume is a little deeper. So Dan Argueta is the pick. I've got him ripping Jean Matsumoto to the mat a few times when it counts and being in his face and withstanding the firepower coming back at him from Jean Matsumoto. So I'll bet on Dan. I already have plus 155, even higher than that. And I will hedge with Jean Matsumoto winning by decision because he's much more of a point fighter than most guys making their UFC debuts. Half his wins are decisions. And again, I really trust the durability of Dan Argueta, and that only makes it easier to hedge a bet. So, like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.